Welcome to the Morning Scoop. My name is Phil. I'm part of the Buckeye Scoop podcast network. We are really excited to bring you a conversation today with longtime Ohio State insider NevadaBuck, coming on the heels of a big Ohio State victory over Big Ten rival Wisconsin. With that, I'll turn it over to today's conversation. Thank you. Welcome to the Morning Scoop. My name is Phil. I'm joined here by longtime Ohio State insider NevadaBuck. Nevada, we had a 52-21 blowout. How are you doing today? What a fun weekend of college football.
It was a great weekend. There's some great games, great weekend of college football, great weekend of some NFL football. But obviously, the highlight was the Ohio State Wisconsin game on Saturday night. National television audience, huge bunch of recruits in the house, blackout crowd, and just a virtuoso performance. One of the best offensively schemed performances that I've ever witnessed at Ohio State. Almost a perfect game from that standpoint, and huge statement game for them in the country, and just was a lot of fun to watch, a lot of fun to be part of.
Yeah, they were wearing that black for the Wisconsin funeral. As both running backs went over 100 yards. You had C.J. Stroud throw for 5 touchdowns. Defense put in a strong performance. You called a blowout here, so maybe we can start with the letter grades. How would you grade it? Let's start with that OSU offense.
Well, for the offense, anytime you score 52 points against Wisconsin, that's got to be an A. And an A maybe light, but maybe an A plus. But that was just a almost a perfectly executed game plan. It was so fun to watch them, fully integrate the tight end into the offense. If you notice, that's like 3 or 4 weeks in a row now where they're actually designing plays to run for the tight end. We've never seen that at Ohio State. We've seen the tight end using from not at all to sparingly to occasionally, but to actually see them design plays with the tight end in mind is something that I can't ever remember seeing at Ohio State. And for them to do it as consistently as they are, it's obviously a purposeful act on their side. And I think a lot of that credit goes to Kevin Wilson, who's been asking them to more fully integrate the tight end into the offensive scheme, and they clearly did it on Saturday night.
Yeah, Cade Stover. I mean, wow. I think we all knew he would bring that toughness to Ohio State, but I have to say I'm quite surprised by his ball skills. I mean, you're seeing a lot of people that are saying, look, this guy he's making better catches than we ever saw with Rucker, which is pretty astounding given the amount of time he's been in at the tight end position.
Yeah, no, I mean, Cade's a guy that obviously came here as a linebacker and kind of moved around, moved to tight end, moved back to linebacker, moved to tight end. I mean, he's been all over the place. Like you said, he's been known for his toughness. Doesn't really look the part of a tight end. He's not the classic 6'5", 6'6" guy, but boy, he is athletic out there. A ferocious blocker, runs great routes, is always open, and when the ball's around him, he catches it. So you can't really ask for much more than that. And the way that Ryan likes to move those tight ends around into those kind of those wing spots, kind of get those numerical advantages on the running game, and then when he can slip out in the passing game, it's tough on a defense. And Cade's been a surprise, an A plus performer as far as I'm concerned, and really one of the keys to the OSU team as well as the OSU offense.
Yeah, he's been pretty fantastic, and the OSU offense obviously when they got out to that early lead, really was troublesome for Wisconsin, which heavily focused on kind of establishing that run game. Forcing them to throw was a problem. But what do you think on the Ohio State defensive side? How would you give that letter grade? I think pretty strong performance as well. We had a few big plays, but Jim Knowles said that's something you can expect.
Yeah, we've talked about that with the Knowles defense, that you got to be ready to get some big plays, but I don't even think he's going to be okay with that last run. That last run is the only thing that brings the grade down from an A minus maybe to a B plus. Great performance when the game was in doubt. They basically swallowed up Wisconsin and gave them no hope. But you can't give up runs like they did there at the end. That left a bad taste in the mouth of some of the stars. I can tell you that, and I know Knowles will give them something to yell at the defense. But all around, you're just seeing the improvement. You're seeing the week by week, step by step, the integration of this defense, and how they're kind of adding new wrinkles every week, and they're getting better and better with every week that goes by. And I think you don't win championships in September and October, but you could sure lose them. And I think that we're getting better defensively, and that's a really promising side as we kind of get into the meat of the Big Ten schedule and deeper into the season, because I think this OSU defense is for real. I think they're playing with a ferocity that we haven't seen in a long time, and that's that's certainly, that's answering one of the biggest question marks that we had coming into the season. So I'm very encouraged.
Yeah, it seems like this Jim Knowles defense, it's kind of like a rolling snowball effect. It's building and building a little bit more momentum. But, I have to say, there's a little bit of worry because right before the game started, we found out that both starting corners were going to be out. Were you a little bit surprised by the injury report? And is this something that we should be concerned about long term when you think about the depth of the secondary?
Well, we knew the one. Burke was not a surprise, but Camp Brown was a surprise. And anytime that you're losing both your starting cornerbacks and you roll guys in there like J.K. Johnson and Jair Brown and have them really not miss a beat, that's a great comfort to Ohio State, and that's something that's going to pay big dividends for them not only this season but down the road. But I think the good news for Ohio State and for Ohio State fans out there is none of the injuries. We don't like to talk too much about the specifics of injuries, but what I can say with absolute confidence is that none of the injuries or the nicks that we're dealing with are of the season-ending variety or long-term type variety. They're more of the day-to-day nagging type of pain management types of issues. And I think that's, Ohio State's about as good shape as you can possibly be at this time of the year. And, again, it's given an opportunity. Whenever somebody goes down, it gives somebody else a chance to play. And this weekend we saw it with Ohio State, and we certainly have more depth at the defensive back position now for having gone through that game. So sometimes you just got to find the blessing, and I think we found the blessing on Saturday night.
Yeah, and speaking of blessings there, I would say, Jair Brown was someone that it seems like in the recruiting process, there were some questions about him. He dropped down the rankings a little bit, but really impressive coming in as a true freshman. What are your thoughts on Jair Brown and his future at Ohio State?
Well, I mean, he played great. I mean, he played great. That was a big moment. It could have been easily for him to be overwhelmed, even though Wisconsin isn't some sort of air raid attack. But they had some guys that could run out there, and he ran with everybody, played well, he did his job, and I thought he really rose up to the moment. And sometimes with recruiting rankings, it's all about when you commit or how you commit or what area you're in with to get that big rating. And I think for him, he was an underrated player in the class and somebody I know that the OSU staff is really excited about, and we all saw why on Saturday night.
Yeah, one thing that really stuck out, and you noticed in Ryan Day's press conference, is that he really made a point to talk about Jair Brown and having his back on that interference call. It was almost like he was talking to Jair, and I think as a true freshman, hearing your coach has your back, it's probably more meaningful than maybe a more senior player who's been out there a bunch. So that was good to see, and it did feel like it was sort of a dual message for both the media and, more importantly, for Jair to hear that his coach has his back.
Well, first of all, it was an egregious call, and you
This
could
is
tell
true.
that Ryan Day was mad. And I always say, why do coaches yell at the refs? And the answer is because it works. And if I've had one
Of
thing with
course.
Ryan, I thought he doesn't work the refs enough, but he was working on Saturday, and he wouldn't let that one go. I mean, he was relentless on that. And like I said, I love to see that kind of fire out of him, and the whole team does. The teams like to know that you're sticking up for them and that you're not nonchalant about things like that, because that was bad. It was bad. It was a big play. It sustained a drive, and Day was not happy about it, and he let the ref know, multiple times.
Well, it's good to put a spotlight on Jair, but how about on defense? Any other unsung heroes that we haven't really talked about?
Well, I think the whole defensive line, the defensive line did a great job. And one of the things that people don't really notice, but the reason that the linebackers were able to flow so easily to the ball, and Josh Proctor and those safeties were able to come up and make those tackles, is because the defensive line was engaging the Wisconsin line, winning the battles, and not allowing them to get to the second level. So you had a lot of free runners out there on defense who were out there making big shots, making the tackles, putting up some gaudy numbers like Tommy's 14 tackles, 2 tackles for losses. But that starts up front, and that was those guys winning those battles, those guys pushing those guys back, those guys engaging the double teams. So the entire defensive line gets my unsung hero for the game award.
Yeah, and especially if you look at Tommy Eichenberg, I mean, what a game! 14 tackles, 2 tackles for a loss. Last year he started to put up some gaudy numbers towards the end of the season, but it seemed like a lot of those tackles, and obviously there's a big problem last year. You can show 10 tackles, but when they're happening 6 or 7 yards down the field, it really sometimes it's pulling the mask over everyone's eyes as far as what's really happening. But it seems like he's blowing up plays right at the line of scrimmage. We didn't see this a year ago, but it's starting to look like we might be losing him to the NFL already after this year. So, any thoughts on his play?
Well, just magnificent player. The good news is Tommy's old school. So, yeah, I mean, Tommy's the type of kid that could come back regardless of NFL draft ranking, and the NFL might want to see a little bit more out of him. But he's a kid that you could keep around a little bit longer because he's just an old school football player, and he's everything you want in an Ohio State linebacker. And I just, like I said, I can't say enough about him. It was his play last year. Frankly, was a mystery to me because he was one of my guys that I thought would have a really
Mhm.
good year last year, and I was promoting him and he didn't look great. I mean, it always have to be fair. He didn't look great, whether it was scheme or lack of athleticism or lack of coordination with the guys up front. But he didn't play great. I mean, I thought until the second half of the Rose Bowl was the first time that I really said, "Man, that's the Tommy I can bring." I know, but this year, I mean, he's AJ Hawk, reincarnated, and it's just great to see because it couldn't happen to a better kid.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting to see. And speaking of pleasant surprises, we finally got to see Julian Fleming pop on a couple plays. He showed some athleticism, made a guy miss. So, do you think this is just a blip in the absence of Jackson Smith and Jigba, or is this something that we're going to see as a continued role going forward?
But you're going to see more and more of him, and you're going to need that because you're going to need all those guys to go to win those games down the stretch. And Julian Fleming is a tough guy. I'm telling you, he is legit tough. He is playing through some painful injuries and doing it without complaint. And he's the guy that the entire team gets jacked up when he does something well because they know how much he's faced, and how much adversity he's kind of gone through at Ohio State. And people have written him off number one wide receiver in the country coming out of high school, and a lot of people are kind of put him in the bust category, but he's far from a bust. He's just been injured, hasn't had a chance to show everything he can do. But we're only starting to see glimpses. I'm telling you, you're only seeing about 50-60% about how good that kid can be. He's absolutely good enough to take over games, and I'm calling that right now. And that could happen down the stretch. Watch out for him to break out and have one of these monster games that everybody's like, where did that come from? Well, it came from he's just a tremendously talented young man.
Well, you heard it here first, and that is, I think, music to everyone's ears. Injuries are one thing. It's hard to really make a fair judgment given like his history of injuries. But that cut he made, I mean, he planted his foot and shook that guy, and he was off. It was, kind of popped off the screen. Really exciting to see. Okay, so finally, I want to do two things. One, we do a first edition of Monday Morning Quarterback, which normally it's about finding an area of improvement. Now, this is going to be a little more challenging this week. So, if there's one area you could focus on and isolate as an area of improvement, what would it be based upon this game against Wisconsin?
Well, I could go with an obvious one of saying the lack of the pass rush from the defense, or I've been harping on a lot about the swing passes or activating the running backs in the passing game. But I'm gonna pick one that's a little unusual, and I'm gonna say Ryan Day having a hook a little faster and getting the starters out of there and getting those second teamers in. The game was not in doubt, and I thought that he was just playing a little Russian roulette with the
Yeah.
punters at that time because the game was not in doubt. There was no question we were going to win big, cover the spread, put a big number on there for the pollsters. I mean, you checked every box, and you still had the guys out there and taking some big shots. I mean, Emeka took a big shot, and just don't like seeing that. My Monday morning quarterback would be get those guys out, let those second teamers go out there and get those reps and finish the game healthy and get on to Rutgers.
It does seem like that's something a little bit you see consistently with Day. I feel like the quarterbacks, especially like Stroud, has been in there a lot longer than I would expect in some of these blowouts. So, maybe it's a product of the COVID years and last year's issues, really trying to get those guys as much experience as possible, but it has been a bit surprising. And finally, the moment that received the most attention from last night, probably not what you would expect, but on social media, it was the camera and broadcast crew focusing in on Marvin Harrison Jr.'s Apple Watch and Louis Vuitton shoes that he was rocking in the first half. And if you notice, he actually came out in the second half with a sort of Nike-approved pair of cleats. Is that normal, or is he? I feel like he's too cool for everyone already. I mean, he just he's one of those guys, like, you put him in the Ohio State uniform, he just looks like a ball player. Now, now he's going out there with Louis Vuitton shoes, so that's a lot of confidence coming through.
Yeah, Marvin's a different kind of kid. He showed up at Ohio State and was I've done some nuggets and reports on his strength testing. He was putting up NFL wide receiver strength numbers already as an incoming freshman, which is just almost unheard of for a wide receiver. But he's a different kid. He marches to the beat of his own drummer. Those wide receivers generally do. As much, like I said, as much attention as the shoes got, the watch was like,
Yeah.
I mean, that was like, a watch, wearing an Apple Watch out there on the football. I mean, that was crazy. I'm not saying it's the first time I've ever seen it, but I haven't seen it much, and it's the first time I've ever seen it on an Ohio State football player, and it might be the last time that we ever see that, because I'm sure Ohio State probably doesn't like that kind of attention. That's not an Ohio State kind of thing to do, but it was fun to watch and on an overall fun evening.
Yeah, you got to get those steps in,
Absolutely.
That's that accelerated path to get your steps in. Go play a Division I college football game against a division rival.
Yeah, well, they were showing the ring. I mean, Holly Rowe showed the ring that they were using there to measure everything like that. So I guess he was just one upping it and going to the watch.
Well, thank you again. It was really great speaking with you, and please follow Buckeye Scoop and make sure you subscribe to Morning Scoop. That's all we have for today, but thank you again.